Hello and welcome to What Not with Anna and Eric. I am Anna May Martin.
And I am Eric Anderson.
Eric is currently lounging about in the great outdoors.
Just enjoying the sunshine. Outside it is enough of being indoors, cooped up. You know what? This bird was made to fly. I'm spreading my wings,
There you
getting
go.
out.
I do have a picture of nature in the background, so I
There you
figure
go. See,
it's close.
so this is what being outside together is in
This is-
social distancing.
Exactly.
It would be funny if you were sitting in a house right there and I was out here and we were just, but it's not the case.
That would be interesting. This is for sure. So we are reading through the Bible chronologically in a year.
Yes,
we are on. Well, today goes through day 140. Reading present.
Phew.
We're really close to halfway. Oh no, that can't.
I don't do math, but no. Well, maybe
calendar-wise,
400.
It would be end of June.
What was yours? Yeah. You thought there was 240 days in a year back when we first started this?
That's not what it was. I mixed up the weeks. And you're judging. You're judging.
No, listen, it's just you're a lot smarter than me. So those couple times where I can be the smart one, I really try to see what it feels like to be on the other side.
Whatever I can do for you, Eric.
Thanks. Make me feel like I'm a part of it. That's what I like about this.
That's good. So we are in. We're in pretty far. Eric, what is your 3-word summary of this week of reading?
So once again, I know we need some deep theological 3 words. Mine is jump around again.
Jump around.
We're back to, we're in Psalms, and then we're in 2nd Chronicle. First, we're jumping around again. My paper Bible was so nice in the Psalms, and then all of a sudden, here we go.
It was only one day, though. That's not bad.
No, but that's why I said again. We're back to it. So, but so you know what? It's just me and my reading. That's my 3-word summary. So
mine is just lots of songs. That's it.
Yes. So
maybe not as fancy as yours.
But my it's not love and not so love relationship with this reading plan is reared its ugly head again, because I was so happy to be hanging out in the Psalms. It was inspirational. It was wonderful. It was what I needed. And then I remembered that Psalms goes on forever.
It does.
I was like enough with the singing the songs. Enough. We get it, David. Move along.
Yeah, we had every day except for one was Psalms.
Yep. So, and all last week was Psalms.
Truth.
Yeah. So we've just been kind of hanging out in that world, which was awesome. But I have to say, and I think it's the Robert Roberts reading plan that does Old Testament, New Testament, Psalm every day as it goes through the Bible in a year. I'm not saying one's better than the other, and I like stretching myself with this chronological.
You're saying one is better than the
other. But I'm saying right now, and it will change once again, the relationship is always changing with his reading plan. But for this one, right now, I'm like, I see why the breaking up Old Testament, New Testament, Psalm every day kind of gets you. But hey, you know what? You can't please everybody all the time.
It does depend on where you are reading wise.
Yeah. But and I don't
how
think
you're feeling about it.
Yeah, and I don't think it helps. Like with the students, we're doing a chapter a day through the New Testament, and we're in Matthew. And there's something just comfortable about knowing that you're in one book, you're building through a certain story. It's just the simplicity of it, I think. So I just need to grow up and challenge myself a little bit, and just. But who knows?
That's okay.
So
no judgment.
Yeah. I just
we did get through Psalms. And
Yes.
our last day was on Solomon becoming king, which actually is, I believe, right before David dies.
I was so.
So I think we
thought
missed his death by a day.
That's what
Did
I
we?
was gonna say. Yeah, because I read it and I'm like, oh, we got through Psalms. Okay, we're gonna do this, and then through 25. The next verse is where David dies. Spoiler. So
Spoiler.
if
We
you
missed it by that much.
so, but yeah, by the time you're watching this, maybe you've already realized that he dies. But yeah,
But we get another
totally,
one more week to hold out for David.
yeah. But yeah, we like
Live.
pulled the emergency brake right before it. Just like finish that. And once again, it's one of those things like it is maybe three verses, and First Chronicles can be done. Like, just just throw those verses in there. But nope, it's got to be chronological, and we're not there yet. So it's all right.
Tried.
But good job, Solomon. Good job,
Yeah.
Solomon. Proud of you.
David's interesting. So the Psalms that we were reading, a lot of these are by David, but not all of them. There was an Ethan in there at one point, as I recall. I also paid attention to the tune of, because we talked about that last week. So like one of them was to the tune of, was it ailments or something of that nature? Where I was like, there's a tune for that.
You got
Sounds
hey,
depressing. It's got to be in minor key, just straight up.
Add it to what now? Spotify playlist. All the tunes of the Psalms.
All the tunes of the Psalms.
The slow jams. But yeah, I tried to kind of keep an eye on that part of when I'm reading the Psalms, is kind of what the song is. And what's cool about the study Bible, and kind of why I've stayed with the paper Bible, is the fact that it starts every psalm with giving you the theme of what's happening. It gives you the theme of what that psalm was written for. So that was pretty fun to kind of look at when you read different psalms that are like worship God and experience the joy of his blessings, and just that reminder for that day to look at things in that way was huge for me. So I kind of spent a lot of times looking more at the themes and then seeing how that relates to my life more than the message or what was going on at that time, like we talked about last week. I spent more applying it in the themes to what I'm going through.
I did not look at what was going on when this was happening. That was a little different.
Good job.
The only one I did notice was, it was one about basically this guy's like, I've been sick since I was a child. And I was like, that can't be David. So I went up to the top and I looked, and that one was by another guy. And I was like, well, I guess he was just a really sick person. And he was singing about it because it sucked.
Yeah. And
that was the only one that I really looked at circumstances.
But yeah, and that's because I really think what's cool about it, and once again, why I wasn't too frustrated that we were staying in Psalms for this long, is making the highlights of like seeing all knowing, all powerful, and everywhere present. God knows us, God is with us, and his greatest gift is to allow us to know him. And just being able to kind of pray through that and say, what points in my life am I kind of minimizing or making God smaller than he really is? And that was huge for me, to just look at those themes and say, okay, let's put some highlights in here or put some sticky notes in here to really remember those, to come back to when I really need to check myself or really need to take a little self-evaluation of where I'm at with my faith. So that's kind of how I use finishing off the Psalms this week.
Nice.
But yeah, so maybe a little helpful hint. I don't know. That's what we're here for.
There were some great verses in here. And I wish I would have looked at alternate translations for this one, but I was reading out of NLT at the time.
Yeah.
And Psalms, where did it go? Wait, one moment.
Holding. Don't
Psalm
worry, I'm in the
73.
sunshine. I'm loving it.
Psalm 73, verse 7. These fat cats have everything their hearts could ever wish for.
Let's see what Psalm 73, verse 7.
I was cracking up laughing. This was David was ranting about, pretty sure it was David. David was ranting about the rich people.
Yeah.
What
From
does
their
yours say?
callous. So 73, verse 7,
Uh-huh.
it says, from their callous hearts comes iniquity. Their evil imaginations have no limits. That's not even close.
It doesn't.
I like yours better.
Mine is hilarious.
Yeah, yours is great. Once again, that's why you explore the different translations, and that's why Amy always makes fun of me that I have this obsession with buying different translations of Bibles, and I have a bunch of different versions. But I love just going through and comparing which one says what, because some of them kind of go a little, and it just makes you wonder, like the biblical scholars that took the time to write that, and that's how it came across. Is
They
kind of
felt
fun.
really good about it.
Yeah.
I was very shocked by it because I was like, this feels like something more like the Message would have in it, because the
Yeah.
Message is pretty liberal with the
Ooh,
word choice.
look at you. Look at
That
you
was
putting
not
a
like
knock on a
a
message.
down on the Message.
Yeah,
I
I
was just
haven't
saying
done that
word
in a
choice.
while.
It's usually, it's called a free translation for a reason.
Truth.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So that one
it's
was pretty funny. I enjoyed that verse.
that one got a little chuckle out of it.
Yeah, I immediately copied it, wrote it in my notes. There were some really good individual verses in here that really made me think about kind of questions that we have as people, I think. So just to kind of hit on some,
Yeah.
and this one is actually following the fat cat verse, because it's talking about rich people and they're just walking around and they're getting whatever they want. So 13 through 14 says, did I keep my heart pure for nothing? Did I keep myself innocent for no reason? I get nothing but trouble all day long. Every morning brings me pain. And which reminded me of a lot of times in our lives where we're like, what was the point of this spiritual journey? Like, did I dive into God for nothing? Did I, go to my life group? Did I serve? Did I do this? And
Yeah.
life is still a bummer. And so those can be hard moments, I think.
Yeah, and I think over the last year in particular, I think with seeing high school students, and we have a few schools that have gone through things that nobody, and they've kept their faith, and they've had that same heart for God as that verse said. And it's amazing to me because I look at adults, or I look at such little things, and it's like, man, if you can just bail out so quickly on such little things, then when there's real troubles, how are you going to really lean in on God? And to see people do that when it's tough is amazing, to kind of see it in real life, to think, wow, yeah, it's very easy to just kind of give up and say, you know what, I'm just going to take control of this and I'm just going to do my own thing. But to know that you can really lean into God in those moments and he's going to come through, I think is huge.
Yeah. And actually, a cool part that came right after this, which was 16 through 17, because the writer of the psalm is working through the same thing. And they say, so I tried to understand why the wicked prosper, but what a difficult task it is. Then I went into your sanctuary, oh God, and I finally understood. And I think that for us, in those moments where we're kind of wrestling with those big ideas and we're like, man, I just don't get it. I don't understand. And I'm trying to figure it out. And I've been going over this and trying to see what is God's plan in this. And then it says, so then I went into your sanctuary, and that's when I got it. And so
Yeah.
those big questions that we have, what is the best thing that you can do? It is to bring it before God into his sanctuary. So
Well,
really like that verse.
yeah, and how it ends there, and once again translations, because it says, till I entered the sanctuary of God, then I understood their final destiny. And for me, when I read that, and I've got it highlighted, because it's understanding the long play, understanding the gift of eternal life in heaven with the Father is so important. So like that moment of clarity that says, you know what, I might be going through this, and this might be a struggle, but am I going to throw that all away? Like think of the end of this whole thing, and do you really want to throw away that gift, that awesome relationship with God, that place in heaven, for just whatever, for that little bit? Or do you want to really understand what you're in it for and understand what the end game is? And I think that's pretty big when it comes to that, wrestling with it, but ultimately understanding how it plays out.
Yeah.
So good times.
Another good verse. Psalms 124:2. And I think this tied into actually a lot of different places in the Psalms. But this one said, what if the Lord had not been on our side when people attacked us? And it's kind of a fun, it kind of starts funny. All right, so Psalms 124. I'm just going to read the first part of it.
Yep.
Because why not read the Bible in our Bible discussions?
Hey, we're hanging out. Might as well, right?
Yeah. So it starts out, if the Lord had not been on our side, let Israel say, if the Lord had not been on our side when people attacked us, what would have happened? And so it's kind of funny because they repeated it in there a couple different times. But it was cool to think about, because there's another verse later on in the reading, which was earlier on in the Bible, which was Psalms 77, where it talks about remembering the wonderful deeds that God has done. And especially during hard times, I mean, times like this even, and to ask ourselves, okay, yeah, this is difficult. Man, what would it have been like if we didn't have God?
Yeah.
What would that have been like? What would our lives look like right now? Like, what if I had never accepted Jesus? What would that be like? To be perfectly blunt, I would probably be dead.
Well, and that's, I think a lot of people, that's where, if people kind of underestimate or they don't value sharing your story or sharing your experience, because if you can say, man, this bad thing really happened to me, or I was really struggling, but you know what, I turned to God and God got me through it. When you can say that, and then you can look at it as an individual and say, yeah, and what if I didn't have God? Like, how could that have played out? It could have played out a lot worse. But there's a moment where you know God's with you and God's on your side, that's what got you through it. And to be able to share that with people and say, and if I didn't have God, it could have gone this way, but really the glory goes to him, because that part that you just read, it goes on and it says in verse 6, it says, praise be to the Lord who has not let us be torn by their teeth. Like that, then it goes into that song of praise to say, okay, now we know who gets the glory for this, and let's praise him for it.
Yeah.
But Psalms, a lot of singing. just enjoying it. Singing some angry songs, singing some happy songs, but it always seems to go back to happy.
It does.
So, but then I'm excited about getting into Solomon's story. I'm excited to kind of see that. I mean, I don't want to undersell David. I think he's huge, but we've been hanging out in the David world for a little while now. So I'm excited for Solomon, and it starts out so good. Solomon starts out so good.
Well,
but then
David kind of starts out pretty good too, though. I mean,
well, yeah,
he gets chosen, he kills a giant.
yeah. No,
Then
I mean, that's
it's
what I'm saying. We're wash, rinse, repeat. You know, we're
yeah.
back in it.
This goes back to that
All,
generational sin problem that
yeah.
is
Oh,
prevalent
yep.
throughout the Old
Yep.
Testament.
You know, we see that start of Solomon, and he is pointed in the right direction for sure. And then, well, stay tuned. Stay tuned.
So I have one more verse I want to talk about. Did you have other
Right.
verses?
No, hit it. I'm in it.
All right,
I'm
this is my
loving.
Jesus verse because
See, you always bring the goodness.
I was very excited. Psalms 110, verse 1.
Whoa.
The Lord said to my Lord, sit in the place of honor at my right hand until I humble your enemies, making them a footstool under your feet. Now, this is technically referenced twice in the New Testament. At one point, Jesus is talking when he's standing before the Sanhedrin, and he says, soon you will see me at the right hand of the Father, which is a reference to this.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on in Acts, this actual verse is referenced again, where in Acts, it says, and David, who has not even been to heaven, says this, the Lord said to my Lord, sit in the place of honor at my right hand until I humble your enemies, making them a footstool under your feet. And then goes back and says, and this is how you know that Jesus is the Messiah. And so it's so cool because actually when I first read this verse, I was like, wait, I'm pretty sure that's Jesus. So I looked it up. And it's directly referenced twice in the New Testament.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was cool because I was talking to a friend of mine about the reading the Bible through a year plan. And they were talking about, man, you know, being entrenched in the Old Testament. I've started reading the Bible so many times and then got stuck in the Old Testament and never got to the New Testament. So they hadn't really
Yeah.
read even the New Testament because they kept starting in Genesis. And I said, well, you know, the cool thing about reading the New Testament first, for those of you who are listening to this and you're like, man, I am entrenched in the Old Testament, I'm never going to get to the new part.
Yeah.
I would actually encourage you to start with the New Testament if you're not really familiar with it and come back, because I think the biggest moments in the Old Testament are really the Jesus moments, where you kind of step back and you're like, there he is again. And that's why he came, and that's who he is, and this is a reference to what he's going to do in the future. And it's so cool to be able to have that New Testament knowledge and to go back to the Old Testament and read through and just see him everywhere. I think that has been the best way I have ever read the the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Is with a New Testament Jesus mindset.
So, yeah, and that's
kind of cool.
I think that is a really awesome way to go about, and that's why I think it's definitely, you can never look at the Bible as a one and done read. Like, I'm going to start, I'm going to finish it, and it's good. Because when I was first starting out, or when I try to get people to start in the Bible, it's starting in that New Testament. And what I see and what I was kind of told is, understand that this is the living word, and let the Holy Spirit kind of guide you through it. Because what happens when you Bible type version, or you see the references in the margin, it pushes you to seek out the Old Testament to say, wow, okay, where does that reference? But then now going through it after reading from that mindset of New Testament, trying to seek out wisdom from the Old Testament, now you're going through it and you're reading it, you're like, wait a second, like I got to that verse in 110 and I'm like, that sounds familiar. And I look right in the margins, it says this is one of the most quoted Psalms in the New Testament because of its clear reference to the Messiah. Like, it's right in your face. And I'm like, that's why I've heard that multiple times over and over again, because it's one of the clearest Old Testament messages to point to the Messiah. So, and point to Jesus. So it's both ways. You can use the New Testament to seek out wisdom from the Old Testament and get those aha moments. But then if you're always reading through the lens of where's Jesus in this, where's the good news in this, it's
Yeah.
really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it breathes life into the Old Testament, especially if you're looking at it from the perspective of Jesus came, he brought a new covenant, he brought new rules, he brought a new reign, a new sin landscape, as it were. He brought newness to the way that we can seek forgiveness. Why should I read the Old Testament at all?
Yeah.
Is what we can kind of think about. But the cool thing about the Old Testament is that when you read it through that New Testament mindset, it brings this whole different life to just all of the text, really. Because then you start to really understand, like, all right, this is how we even got to Jesus. This
Yeah.
is why Jesus was necessary. This is what Jesus brought us out of. If we didn't have Jesus, we would be sacrificing bulls on a mountain
Well,
somewhere.
that's what I'm saying. Man, that's what it always kind of makes me chuckle a little bit when everybody says, man, it's so hard to be a Christian. It's so tough. I'm like, man, it
Yeah.
was a lot tougher. There's some stories that made it look to be a lot tougher back in Old Testament days. Even when the New Testament's written, when we get there, it was
Yeah.
even a lot more difficult there with persecution and everything. So being very difficult to be a Christian now, we can put it in perspective that, you know what, being a follower of God was a lot different than being a Christ follower. That was a lot more difficult.
Yes.
So
Which is a very good distinction, actually.
yeah, yeah,
What
yeah,
Christ
Christian
brought
is-
into the mix.
yeah, game changer. That
Yeah.
guy.
I think
guy
one of the
really-
biggest things I was struck by as we were reading through, especially like the old covenant things, and I just thought, man, if I lived back then, I would have died like 30 times. Like, of
Oh,
all
yeah,
the
it would not
things
have
we were put to death for.
It,
I'm like, I
it
done
would
that.
have not worked out.
I did that. I did that.
And I just think of how many times I wander into the wrong part of a store or a wrong part of a building that I'm not supposed to be in. Like, not a chance.
Like, oh no, it's the Holy of Holies.
Yeah.
Get out now.
Oh, yeah. No,
Oops.
it would have been. Yeah, and like, I always want to eat food. Like, yeah, I would have been in the wrong place at the wrong time for sure. But-
Thank goodness for Jesus.
Yeah, he really bailed me out. Really
Yeah.
bailed me out.
And actually, this segues perfectly into my next step because
Oh,
thank goodness for Jesus. God actually says this comes up in one of the Psalms. So it's like it wasn't a traditional one. It was like a song from God's perspective, basically, as to what is he saying to us. And so he says, Psalms 50:23, but giving thanks is a sacrifice that truly honors me. And there are a couple different parts in that same psalm where he talks about giving thanks and, you sacrifice all this stuff, but what I really want is for you to thank me. And so as we're going through this Old Testament and kind of giving a fresh perspective on how life could have been, I think that my next step is to take time to just say thank you. I mean, it'd be great.
I think if you can take time this week and take time in this next step to really be aware of where you can give thanks to God, I think that's so important with everything, because I think we can find so many ways to blame God or get upset with God. If we really time to thank him and to really see the things that we can be grateful for in this world, it can be a real life-changing experience.
Yeah. And
So I
honestly,
like that next step.
it is good for you too.
For me,
For you specifically.
like me, are you telling me that do you
Well-
want a thank you card, Anna? Are you looking for a thank you card?
Well, it goes back to that other verse of remember what God has done for you. Like, what would life be like without Jesus? When
Yeah.
you thank God, you start to remember those things.
Yeah.
Like, God, thank
So-
you for that time you saved me from
Yeah.
that tree falling on me. That was nice.
Man, that's always a good time. That is always a good time that his hand was in that.
Yeah.
So, but awesome, Anna. I love it. You know what? This is a great break. Even it's nice to do it out. You should try this. You should try setting up outside and hanging out for this. Yeah,
My
true
choice.
enough. True enough. And you know, I thought I would have learned from our talking back and forth, but I don't have sunscreen on. I need to go apply sunscreen. It was cloudy when I came out here, and now the sun's shining. I'm in trouble.
I
It's gonna go
actually
bad.
almost went outside for this podcast, but I am so sunburned. I was like, I will die if I go out there.
Oh man.
So, next week we have to look forward to a couple things. David he croaks. Look forward to that, I guess. Also,
Yeah.
the last day we get into one of my favorite books of the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. It's probably my top book in the Old Testament,
Ooh.
and that is Proverbs. Love me some Proverbs.
And once again, that one's kind of 30. I think 30. Is it 30 or 31? Is it 30? I think there's 30 of them. So we won't be in
31.
there for as long as
Isn't that 31?
we'll be in there for Psalms.
It's definitely 31.
That's what it is. Listen.
Yeah.
I-
So there's Psalm.
There you
Proverb
go.
for each day.
Yeah. So there you go. So we can't hang out in there for weeks on end. So it'll be a
Too
good
bad.
time.
It's a good one.
It is.
You wish
Well,
there was
I'm excited.
150
That's
Proverbs.
Oh man, I love it, Anna. All right, I'm gonna go enjoy the rest of this beautiful day.
Yeah, do it. And if you're listening, enjoy your life.
You know what? Truth.
Thank you.
And be thankful. Thank God for it. Thank God
thank
for
God
it.
for this beautiful day. So
All
thank
right.
you for listening to What Now with
I'll
Ann and
see you,
Eric.
Anna.
Bye.